he's a snake. He'll go back, he'll flip-flop. He's let me down before. I was a candidate and he just disappeared. He'll probably disappear to America again. He'll disappear when he gets a better offer. He'll sell us out. All of those things can be true at the same time as you vote reform. By voting reform, you are not placing a vote that says, I like Nigel Farage and I trust him. You're saying, I know the direction this country needs to take. For now, I'll give this guy a tick. All you're doing is gaming the system. The system means we never truly have a voice. It's like being at a casino. You're going in to game the system to get the result we need in order that we can course correct later.
The Uni Party must be destroyed. The UK's two-party system props up an evil establishment. Evil, hear that? Because they use a deep state and a corrupt and crooked MSM to push through policies for which the British are actually overwhelmingly opposed. And next week, as we broadcast our Outspoken election results show, I think we are going to be seeing a significant moment in its destruction. The final polls show Reform UK and the Greens taking control of mayoralties, meaning the levers of power will be wrenched from Labour and the Tories and not before time. So no wonder the hard left have been attempting serious lawfare to force the brilliant Andrea Jenkyns out of the Lincolnshire race. Good luck with that. Meanwhile, Nigel is playing the trump card, posting even negative MSM coverage with pride and bigging up his chances.
Maybe a good omen for next week, because overnight we've won a district council by-election in Arran, in West Sussex. We won it against a fierce Liberal Democrat campaign. We're even scoring well and winning in areas that aren't necessarily our best. A good omen.
And while regular viewers will know I have significant and well-documented issues with the current leftward direction of reform under its Tory chairman Zia Youssef, that doesn't mean I wouldn't vote for the party next week if I had the option, as I have made clear, despite a whole load of senior attacks from the reform mafia coming for me. It's too early. That's the point. It's too early. But to be very clear, by the way, to all of the people who think I'm somehow turning on reform, if I was voting in the local elections next week, I would be voting for Reform UK. That doesn't mean that there shouldn't be scrutiny on where this party is going, because we don't want Tory 2.0. Didn't work first time around, and so we need something better in order to save the country. And on a similar note, to much chagrin, Katie Hopkins has overnight endorsed reform at the local elections too, praising Nigel Farage's, quote, serious and not flippant change in tone and style as he U-turned on declaring mass deportations as impossible yesterday. She posted on X, "You need to choose your monsters," and a line behind one. "This is our monster. Vote reform," on the 1st of May. She then released this video, which included praise for Ben Habib and Rupert Lowe, two men who are without doubt keeping the heat on reform to the right.
Have a minister for deportation and will roll back on net zero and all of that nonsense. It's good to see this shift, and well done to Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib who have pushed for this. You don't have to like the guy, you just have to choose your monsters, and right now Nigel is the right monster to choose.
Despite a flurry of furious responses from her supporters who are disgusted, and I understand this, disgusted by Reform's decision to report Lowe to the police and expel members of the party for stating obvious things like, Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner, despite that, Katie was holding firm.
Do I think that the problems of this country are going to be solved at the ballot box? No. And without wishing to overstate this, do I think that what needs to happen in our country is going to be polite or peaceful? No. And do I think you can only push good men so far before they have nothing to lose and they're willing to do more than just tick a box because their grandchildren or their children depend on them? Yes, I do. But for now, the message that I would love to be able to give to you is all the things that you think, I'm sure all these things that you're telling me, he's a snake, he'll go back, he'll flip-flop, he's let me down before, I was a candidate and he just disappeared. He'll probably disappear to America again. He'll disappear when he gets a better offer. He'll sell us out. All of those things can be true at the same time as you vote reform. By voting reform, you are not placing a vote that says, I like Nigel Farage and I trust him. You're saying, I know the direction this country needs to take. For now, I'll give this guy a tick. All you're doing is gaming the system. The system means we never truly have a voice. It's like being at a casino. You're going in to game the system to get the result we need in order that we can course correct later.
And look, it's partly for that reason that when folk have criticised me for holding reform to account, and I have held it to account, over its slide to the left on issues like moving away from mass deportations, I say, look at Nigel's U-turn yesterday. As Rob Esk posted on X, Rupert has done his job. I don't think he was ever serious about leading reform, but his outspoken rhetoric on X has forced reform to echo his sentiments in policy. And that's why I promise to keep the pressure up. Because we need a party brave enough to save the country with policies bolder than has ever been seen before. And I make no apology for the fact that unlike so many other so-called independent commentators, and you know who I mean, I am not a propagandist or a shill for any party. I simply want to achieve the change that is required. And so while there may be some union on the right in this week before the local elections, that's unlikely to last. I mean, the MSM is finally getting interested in this new Ben Habib vehicle, the Integrity Party, although the I newspaper has already declared his relaxed attitude to the possibility of Tommy Robinson joining leaves his new venture dead on arrival. God, they just still don't get it, do they? Habib himself posted, the new party I've yet to launch has gone from no members last week to over 700 today. We have raised nearly £20,000. We are inundated with offers of support and we haven't even launched. Thank you very much, everyone that has donated and joined. Watch this space. And of course, I understand why so many of you still have questions about the future of Reform UK. Like, on mass deportations, let me just remind you that Nigel has gone from saying this on GB News a few months ago.
It's a political impossibility to deport hundreds of thousands of people. We simply can't do it.
To this new position just ahead of the polls.
It is our intention, ultimately, that if you've come illegally, you should not be able to stay. You should not be able to make a spurious claim that somehow your right to a family life means you should stay here. We will, in 3 to 4 weeks' time, announce more detailed policy on how we will actually carry out those deportations. We'll do that after the election, but I make the intention very, very clear.
Even his employers at GB News suggested he was the Lib Dems in disguise.
Now, just looking at your policies, Nigel Farage, you want to nationalise British Steel, you support the unions, you want to lift tax-free allowances, you criticise net zero. Are you the Liberal Democrats in disguise? Because you're trying to appeal to different parts of the country with different policies.
No, we're just common sense. And
you're doing different things for different audiences.
And they suggested that reform is moving to the left.
But you're confusing politically. You're going left and right, tacking this way and that, aren't you?
No, there is something called the national interest.
Okay.
So look, I know Farage noticeably avoided both questions, but I have a problem, and I'm not afraid to say it. I have a problem with the fact that this is now a party that welcomes with open arms candidates or branch chairs who believe that the UK should pay reparations for historic slavery while booting anyone out who said the F word or the C word or, as I say, has praised Tommy Robinson. Meanwhile, this is all just a game to those cretins at Sly News.
Prove that. time will prove that. At the minute, I'm sceptical. Look, we're all allowed, as we get older, to change our positions on things. Of course we are. But his current policy positioning just seems so far removed from everything he's ever stood for.
I mean, I think that's what you called a political drive-by.
I mean, I'm not sure tonight Robert Jenrick will feel particularly at home in Reform UK. Not sure Robert Jenrick feels particularly at home in Kenny Badenoch's version of the Conservative Party. So spare a thought for Robert Jenrick tonight.
That is pretty difficult. Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there speaking to Robert. Oh my goodness.
He's not the leader of Reform yet.
Speaking about Robert Jenrick.
It's all just a game to them. It's all just a laugh to them because they really have no idea what's at stake. Now, someone who does. Peter Whittle, founder and director of the brilliant New Culture Forum, is here. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact-checkers who claim to determine which facts are true. And for good reason, given the ongoing debates over free speech, the controversy surrounding Brexit, and how Trump and other anti-establishment politicians are portrayed. But I have the solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and manipulative narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. It has been a game changer for a news junkie like me, and you can see it all for yourself right now. ground.news/outspoken. But I want to show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's take a story that I've been very passionate about, the Supreme Court ruling in the United Kingdom that made the point that women can only be biological adult human females. You can see clearly in one place that over 350 sources around the world covered this story. Ground News instantly shows how it's being covered by the media, broken down by whether they lean to the left or the right. Now, this is called the illustration bias distribution chart. If you scroll down, you can see every headline about the story along with the political bias and ownership of the publication. So you can see quite clearly for yourselves that on the right, the Daily Wire cover the case totally soundly with the headline UK Supreme Court rules trans-identifying men are not women. Spiked Online, very forthright, declaring women exist, get over it. While the Daily Telegraph looked in depth at the disgraced famous faces who declared trans women are women. By stark contrast, the left-wing National said the result was only a victory for gender-critical feminists, and the Canary ran with a clearly ridiculous headline, "Victory for the far right," as Supreme Court rolls back trans women's rights by 2 decades. Now, I would absolutely love the Canary to tell J.K. Rowling to her face that she is far right. Anyway, my favourite feature is the blind spot feed. That surfaces upwards of 20 stories daily that receive the majority of coverage from one side of the political spectrum. So if you like the news like I do, the blind spot feed is the best way to get a balanced perspective on what's happening. So go to ground.news/outspoken, or if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, just scan the QR code on the screen to subscribe today. Use that address and you will get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use for unlimited access. So let me repeat the address, ground.news/outspoken. But now, back to the show. Peter, so great to have you today. Do you understand why Katie Hopkins is saying, look, it doesn't matter that Nigel Farage is a snake, if that is indeed what you think? It doesn't matter that Rupert Lowe was reported to the police because next week we've got to send a message, and the only way at this point to send a message is via Reform UK.
Well, I think actually, Dan, Katie was articulating a kind of conundrum that many people sort of feel about this, in the sense that they've got reservations about reform for all the reasons that you've just gone through in your digest. They don't think that they are radical enough. I've certainly been critical of aspects of that myself. But on the other hand, you sort of then think, yes, but maybe this is the kind of one chance we have to basically forever change this terrible status, this logjam we have of the two major parties. And I think where she's kind of right is that, whatever you think about reform at the moment, the fact is that it will open up, if you like, a new kind of avenue, possibly. Because she sort of doesn't say it, but is sort of hinting at maybe there'll be something else, that there'll be a chance of something else. And I think that is something that I know I discuss an awful lot with people, myself, that essentially, reform, if you like, is a battering ram to kind of go in to this situation we have in Parliament, where Parliament now is probably, I think Nigel Farage has even said this himself, probably the most unrepresentative that it's ever been, actually, the makeup of it. And so that it does have an extremely important role to play in that way. But against that, you mentioned there, for example, the announcement this week about deportations. I'm not completely clear about that, Dan. I don't know whether I'm missing something, but I remember what Nigel originally said to Steve Edgerton in that interview. He was very, very clear about it. It was sort of like, it wasn't even hedging about. He was very clear.
No, impossible. He used the word impossible.
Impossible. It was also quite a, I thought, spontaneous response, actually, which is kind of useful to know. This time around, he was saying, this is what we want to do. I think the crucial thing is this, and this is what people will be wanting to know, and I still want to know. It's kind of fancy use of language in a way. So you can say, this is what we want to do, and you can say, fine. But what we're talking about, surely, and what people really want to know is, what about the 1.2 million people, illegal migrants already here? And that's a very, very conservative estimate, I would suggest.
Yeah. I'd say very easily we can say 2 million, right?
Yes, I'd say 2, actually. You know what? These figures always come out later, don't they? I mean, we go along with these figures and then suddenly, actually, it's a bit more than that. It's a bit more than that. What's the situation there with reform? This is what I'm still not quite clear about. Look, deporting people who come to the country now illegally, all you're doing is enforcing the law as it stands. You immediately have a criminal record by virtue of coming in illegally. So I think it's a question really of how are you going to kind of deal with, what is reform going to do? Is it going to commit to basically deporting people who maybe have been here for a long time, not unlike what Donald Trump is doing? That I think is very important. So in fact, there's still, for me, some vagueness about it. There's vagueness about the general immigration policy, for example, with reform. I think they're still clinging, or they're still going with their net zero migration policy, which is essentially a kind of one in, one out thing. I think it's deeply flawed and deeply unsatisfactory myself. It actually doesn't change very much at all.
It's not far enough. And then we have on the other side, Rupert Lowe, until recently, the star Reform UK MP. Now, he lays it out very clearly, I believe, Peter, but let me read out his plan to you and then I'll get you to respond. So this is how he explains it, Peter. He says, we're told that deporting hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants is impossible. Why? Total defeatist rot. Britain has the capabilities. What's missing is the political will and a backbone. Here's how it can be done. Day one, the Great Repeal Act. Sweep away decades of malign and obstructive legislation, including our departure from the ECHR. The law doesn't allow mass deportations. Change the law. We must reinforce ministerial powers to do what needs to be done. No woke activist judge can then stand in the way. Stop the flow. The deterrent would soon speak for itself, but in the meantime, deploy the Royal Navy to intercept the boats and send them back to France. Those who do arrive, they do not remain on mainland. Detained offshore, processed for transfer, sent home or to a third-party country such as Rwanda if their origin cannot be determined. Whatever happens, they do not stay in the UK. Remove the incentives. Scrap the entire asylum system. It has been abused and exploited for too long. Operation Return, detain, deport. 1 million plus are here illegally. They must all go. Significantly expand detention infrastructure using former military sites, modular units, and offshore facilities. Deport by sea and air. Use cruise ships for relevant destinations. Construct a number of specialised runways if required near large detention centres. On day one, start hiring and training the staff. It will cost billions to do it properly, but every penny will be worth it. Leverage. Countries refuse to accept their deportees. Cancel foreign aid. Suspend visa applications. Sanctions on remittances. Enforce tariffs. Do it all with like-minded countries, a deportation NATO. Red list. Implement an immigration red list whereby countries with high levels of visa abuse, security concerns, links to extremism, serious crime, sexual offences, welfare access, culture concerns, and more face significantly higher barriers for entry. Uncooperation with deportations, they go on the list. Be ruthless. Public confidence. Publish a live removals dashboard and require ministers to report monthly progress to Parliament. Show the British people what is happening, why it's happening, and how much money it will save in the long term. Here's a clue: a lot. Will this happen overnight? No, but this is only required because of decades of inaction has allowed the problem to grow so wildly out of control. So what? Because the issue is now too great, we can't even begin to tackle it? Ludicrous. I say send them home. The mass deportation of illegal migrants is not only possible, it's absolutely necessary. So Peter Whittle, there's Rupert Lowe's plan. What do you think?
I agree with every word. I agree with every word. I imagine that a lot of people who are basically getting ready to vote for reform next week, as you say, Dan, would also agree with every word. It has been a question of a total lack of political will. Look, when this, I've discussed this so many times, as indeed have you, Dan. I mean, the fact is that there's very little that governments cannot do if they want to. Anyone, and that's all of us, who lived through the pandemic and the lockdown know that, right? It was amazing what they could actually do because that's what they were decided to do. And we found ourselves in a situation we'd never been in before, and rights taken away from us that we never thought would ever be taken away. And it happened. It can happen. When various wars come up, there's always money for those wars, same thing. So I think it is a matter of the will. And I think that Rupert's gone out there and basically, pretty much been quite detailed actually in that plan. And I think that, is there anyone who will say no to any of that? Is there anyone? I mean, the problem is the people that you are dealing with and you're arguing with, which is basically our political and cultural establishment when it comes to immigration generally, but also, of course, in the case of the boats, in this case, they essentially not only lack the will, they have what I would call anti-will. They actually don't mind this situation. They don't see a problem, and they currently have their kind of, I would say, their expression in the Labour Party mostly. But that is what you are up against. Years of inertia, but also people who actively think we should take everybody that comes to Britain and also take them on their own word. You mentioned, or rather Rupert did mention, their crime. It's a very good thing that actually we are finally going to hear about crime statistics and migration. That's basically going to be by the end of the year or something. We shouldn't have to kind of sort of get blood out of a stone with this sort of thing, Dan. It's so difficult to get hold of this information, unlike in Europe. But for example, quite recently, the New Culture Forum did a documentary, Heresies, with Alex Phillips, whom I know you've had on. And
great documentary.
Yes, it was about basically this extraordinary rise in sexual crime, rape, sexual assault. And, this 300% rise that's happened in this country has pretty much happened concomitantly with the migration surge of the recent years. And in fact, we found data which show various different nationalities being overrepresented in those statistics. So we definitely need that country. These things were absolutely untouchable for a long time, and they're gradually becoming, public. And so therefore it's no surprise that people are getting angrier and angrier with every minute. That's the one, yes, immigration and the rise in rape. It's a very important, not just plugging it because we made it, but I mean, it's extremely important because women, in many respects, are on the front line of this change in our society. We're seeing demographic changes now, whether it is the men on the boats coming over or indeed more broadly, who have very, I would call antediluvian attitudes to women and what they can do to women and what the place of women. And essentially, that will take a long time for the penny to drop in the wider public, but it will happen, I think.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.